Well, welcome to Dreamforce. Thank you for coming to this session for Jumpstart Your Mobile Development in Lightning Platform. My name is Igor, and I work at BISC, where we manage a number of online education programs for some of the top universities in the country, such as Villanova, Notre Dame, and MSU, to name a few. And today, we'll look at how you would do a mobile development on a platform. How do you start the development process? So before we begin, the ever exciting slide: make your purchasing decisions only what's available, and not what I'm going to be talking about here. And with that, we get started. So a quick agenda. What we talk about is we'll look at Power of Lightning, what it offers us in a mobility platform. I'll talk about SDK and how do you use mobile SDK to build your apps, to start building. We'll touch on security aspects, connected apps, and how that relates to your mobile development. And also offline, as well as look at Heroku and some of the architecture pattern that apply to mobile applications when we build them, right? So how many of you are building like mobile apps or trying or thinking of it? Like some show of hands here. Well, some fair amount of people. And some mobile development out there. Now, if you've been in it for a while, you know it's a forest out there. There's a lot of different technologies. There's Android, there's iOS, there's different languages, there's Swift, Objective-C, Java, you name it. Even now, Astra, they're asking questions like, what do I start? What do I do? Right? Cody doesn't even know, like, hey, I give up, right? But never fear. Lightning Platform is here to help you. And we'll go over and hopefully, after this session, you'll walk away and blaze your mobile trail through this forest very easily. So first, let's start with a basic question. Why you want to build it and who you build it for, like the audience, right? Why, hopefully, will be answered for you by your stakeholders or particular target you want to achieve. And the audience are usually separated into two groups: your internal users and your external users, right? So internal users tend to be usually your employees, smaller group of people, not as big of a scale. Some of them already have access to Salesforce, either mobile or otherwise. Your external users are more challenging. They could be in the millions, depending on your use case, right? And then next, we'll look at the use case. Now, this is a hypothetical use case that I put together from an actual experience from a few years ago. I built an application for this type of customer. And we're going to walk through that and see how we make decisions based on our requirements, what we get, and how it all plays out, right? So we have this insurance company. I named it SaleDreams. It's a $6 billion business in US and globally. They have about 3,000 reps that sell the business and also consult enterprises on their how to sell and how to set up their benefits program, right? Now, they've run into some problems when they implemented Salesforce for this team. They had a lower adoption. Salespeople globally didn't want to use it that much. Some of them went with paper, Excels, you name it. So some of the data was in Salesforce, some not. It was very hard to report on and whatnot, right? So another thing they've identified as a leadership, they looked at their business and said, hey, we have these different sales teams that sell to aviation industry, they sell to construction industry, different industries come together, but we never cross-sell. Sometimes we're building something here and we need an insurance for construction for this industry, but this construction team does not know about it, so we never sell anything to these other industries. So I said, well, this would be good to have a cross-sale opportunity. And they've looked at this and said, well, if we do this, we're a $6 billion business, we could potentially increase it by 50 or 60%. That's a good number and a good motivator to start thinking about mobility, right? They wanted to enable their mobile group to be able to use the either iPads or iPhones to sell this insurance, to provide a lot of complex information, right? This is one of the aspects of it. The next aspect is design, right? That will be something that drives your development, right? Designs come in different shapes and forms, and they dictate the flow. We're not going to talk too much about design here. This is not a UX session, but it's an important point to note it, that it will play in your decision-making when you're actually selecting your technology, right? Now, another aspect that I didn't note it is that this team actually had internal implementation. They also had an internal mobile team that supported already existing mobile apps. And one of the requirements, they wanted this new app to interact with a Salesforce mobile app. So kind of two apps go together. So let's start looking at our technology options, right? Asking best, sorry, I'm going back here. Hey. Okay, so reviewing our technology options, considering no-code option, obviously we know we're going to deal with Salesforce mobile app and do some customization. And by the way, there's a list of other apps that we may potentially leverage in some other use cases, right? Like Quip or field service or Service Cloud application that could potentially be out of the box. Just turn it on and you're good to go, right? The next is a low-code option. Is essentially enables you to customize your Salesforce mobile apps with Lightning components. And you can also brand your mobile app as your application. Now, in this use case, we don't need to brand it. So we're not going to use that particular case. But that could be applicable in some situations. And also, if you use communities, now with Summer 18 available feature that you can wrap your community in a mobile app as a hybrid component and actually deploy it to App Store. And finally, the code option, which is Mobile SDK. And Mobile SDK provides a lot of different features out of the box, right? So things like OAuth, two-factor authentication, various standard APIs accessed directly out of the box. And you also can add on Service SDK to the mobile app so that you can enable Live Agent directly on your mobile device. You can even do your SOS video session directly out of your phone or your iPad, right? And so I also mentioned here Swiftly Salesforce. That's a lightweight framework. If you ever wanted to build something quick in iOS and didn't need a lot of the features, that's an open source platform developed by one of the evangelists at Salesforce. And it provides you a REST API connection to Salesforce, and that's it, unlike Salesforce Mobile SDK. So making our case for technology, based on what we know, we have a mobile team that is native developers. We're potentially going to be building a native app, right? And then with that, we have a situation where we need OAuth, we need offline capabilities, we need various other features that actually map well. But before we start building that, we need to set up our org. And our org essentially would need a mobile development start for creating a connected app that will manage security context for our applications. And the second one will be my domain. And then the next one, if you were to enable Live Agent, you would need a community potentially to handle these communications. Now, we talked about connecting two applications together. And that was one of the requirements. We want our custom app to talk to an application that is Salesforce Mobile, which we didn't build. We don't have the code for that. And mobile luckily supports something called URL schemes, which enables us for native application just launch another app. Because in iOS, for example, there's a sandbox around security, and you can't touch another app from your app. So this is a way sort of to invoke an application and do deep linking and show you data. And we'll see some examples of that in the future. So let's start building. So we'll generate our app by starting with force iOS command create. And we'll just build an example here. And I'm going to start launching this, running it on my computer. While it's generating, let's look at a connected app, what it looks like. So important piece to note, a connected app is a security context for any external application like mobile as well as web application potentially, which allows you to manage who has access to your data and how. Importantly, when you create this and you enable OAuth, you're going to have this security key, which you're going to put in your code. And this security key will identify this mobile device connection to my Salesforce org. And that link basically says, OK, these people are allowed to access the data, and I know who they are. So this is one of the ways to do it. Another one is consumer secret key, and we have a callback URL, which is part of the SDK. But you could change that. Another thing you could do with connected apps is manage your application and handle your policies here for access for IP restrictions and whatnot. And we'll see, our generation is finished. So we basically generated the code. And the code will generate an Xcode project for you. And this Xcode project would look something like this. You have a number of files here. The dependencies are managed for you out of the box with this. So a mobile SDK, when you build it, will give you all the dependencies necessary for accessing Salesforce data to connections. Now here you see mobile SDK gave us a default key, which we'll have to replace. Then there's other things that we have here, such as push notifications that can be enabled in our app delegate. And we also can add various other things, like, for example, this is a piece of code, a line of code that enables us to actually invoke our Salesforce mobile application and deep link via the URL. As long as we have an ID, for example, for an account, I can edit that account on the other app. And so let's take a look at a quick demo here. We have our application, and let's see how that works. So let's say this is a list of accounts, and I could jump back to my mobile application, and I'm jumping back. So I can go back and forth between the two apps almost seamlessly, and user experience doesn't necessarily suffer, and I don't have to rebuild that wheel again if I need to edit. So that's a quick win for our business, essentially. We looked at this code already. This is some of the examples how we would enable chat, for example, and if you wanted to open a case or you wanted to do a knowledge search directly on your mobile device to help your users to navigate stuff like a help, kind of a self-help situation. Now, with that, we've kind of built an application very quickly here that could already fit a lot of the requirements that we had from our customer or our stakeholders. We can only now iterate from it and start building quickly on this. So, word of it on API. Every mobile application lives off of APIs. Most of the mobile applications leverage REST API, sometimes standard, sometimes custom. And occasionally, you would use something like user interface APIs that enable to bring data and metadata together so you can render your screens dynamically versus hard coding that on your iOS or Android platforms. And then there's a SOAP API that can be leveraged. Sometimes it is useful. Not always it's the case. Most of the REST API is what's being used for that. And there's also REST API communicates to your mobile device via JSON that you need to parse. And JSON is a simple text protocol. It requires some formatting. And so there's existing languages like YAML and RAML that allows you to create a schema and control what that structure looks like, as well as Appier and Swagger can allow you to design your APIs even when you don't have a backend completed. So those are good tips on that. Let's look at our architecture next. So with our architecture, kind of a simple, this is architecture I like. So you have a mobile device connecting directly to Salesforce. You have two issues there, is limit on licenses, right? Our case, we only have about 3,000 users or so globally, and they were already Salesforce users, no problem there. And REST API limit, from that group, we don't expect to hit that. Now, if you were a larger group of users, you might hit that, and potentially you may leverage community logins for that, and your mobile application would connect to communities, and then you have much bigger audience to work with. And the following is a little bit more complex, right? That introducing the Heroku API layer in between. For example, sourcing the Salesforce data into the database like Postgres via Heroku Connect that will synchronize the data for you, and then you build your APIs on Heroku in whatever language you want and access it directly, right? Now here we have another problem, is that your authentications are not taken care of, so potentially you need to think of that. You're going to need to build your sharing and visibility model on top of this because you're not connecting Salesforce anymore. You're no longer a user in Salesforce. You can't just click your way out of seeing this account or that account. Now this is something you have to program. And similar pattern here was using something like MuleSoft or ESB platform, which delivers you multiple APIs to kind of play with. But this have the same problem like Heroku, where you also have a REST API limitations, as well as building your OAuth or other authentication and user provisioning process, right? So that's will be a little bit just an idea of how you would approach different architectures, right? And so where you would start to learn things is Trailhead would be first stop. I listed a couple of trails over there. That will be very useful if you want to start with mobile device, mobile management using the mobile SDK, or learning, for example, about React, or learning hybrid applications, right? So that's kind of the session, and I will thank you, and I'm available for a couple of questions here. So if you guys have questions,